Well, good evening everyone to this evening's council meeting, the 30th of November 2020. Can you please be upstanding for the reading of the prayer? I'll now call upon Councillor Sinfield to read the council prayer.
Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen.
I acknowledge the traditional owners as the original custodians of this land, including the Wurundjeri people in the northern part of our city. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and any elders from other communities who may be here today. Given the recent changes to the COVID-19 restrictions, councillors are being able to present for the meeting this evening. Unlike previous years due to COVID-19, we're not being able to be joined tonight by our community. This meeting is being live streamed on the council's website to enable the community to view the proceedings. Should technical problems be encountered this evening, the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, or if needed, the meeting will be postponed. I'd like to now introduce my fellow councillors and officers. Seated to the left-hand side of the horseshoe table, to my left, Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Susan Bigger, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and on the opposite side we have Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Di Gillies, Councillor Jane Addis, and Councillor Victor Franco. Other officers in attendance this evening, seated to my immediate right, is our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Philip Storer. Seated to his right is our Director of Customer and Transformation, Mr Bruce Stopson. We also have officers from Director of Urban Living, Mr Shane Wickroma-Singer, Director of Places and Spaces, Mr Daniel Freer, Director of Community Support, Ms Carolyn McLean. Seated to my left, Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr David Thompson, and seated to his left, Senior Governance Officer, Ms Elizabeth Manu. There are also a number of other staff members in attendance this evening, and they'll be presenting reports as need be. Mr Thompson, are there any apologies this evening?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we have an apology from Councillor Stavrou for this evening.
Thank you, Mr Thompson. Item 1 on the agenda, adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 27th of July 2020, the 24th of August 2020, the special meetings of council held on the 14th of September 2020, the 21st of September 2020, and the 12th of October 2020. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As circulated, please.
Thank you. And a seconder, I believe, Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to second, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to that item? I'll now put that item to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 2, declaration of any conflict of interest of any council or council officer. Are there any conflicts of interest this evening? There appears to be none. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 3.1, petitions. Councillors, Mr Thompson, I believe we have...
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. Councillors, in your business paper tonight are 4 petitions, noting that since the distribution of the agenda, we've received 1 additional petition, which is set out as item 4 on the screen behind me. The council report gives a high-level précis or description of the matters that are being brought forward for your consideration. As such, I commend the officer's recommendation as set out on the screen behind me, acknowledging that there's a second page to the officer's recommendation. If you could just move that up a little bit, please, Liz.
Thank you, Mr Thompson, and I recognise the last petition that came this evening from a young resident, Mr Nicholas Rowe, who's taken the initiative as a young Boroondara resident in the Solway ward. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion to adopt the petitions as presented. Councillor Sinfield.
as per the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Addis.
Yes, happy to second.
Thank you, councillors. I will now put that item to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 4, assemblies of councillors. Councillors, is anyone, we've got an item coming up on the screen. Assemblies of councillors. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion. Councillor Watson.
As printed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you. Is anyone opposed? There appears to be none. I will put that item to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 5, public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 noon will be provided a detailed verbal response, as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 o'clock will receive verbal response, if possible, but otherwise will be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr Thompson, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Mr Mayor, 2 residents have submitted 5 questions. Copies of the questions have been circulated to councillors.
Thank you. The questions of each of these have been referred to the relevant council officer to provide a written response in due course. We have 2 questions from Mr Greg Deacon of Camberwell, subject the Camberwell Fresh Food Market. These questions have been disallowed. The questions do not relate to a matter on the agenda for the current council meeting, and the questions have not been previously asked in writing and received a written response from a councillor or a member of council staff. As such, the questions are disallowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. Councillors have received a copy of the questions. Mr Deacon will receive a response to his questions in due course from the Director of Community Support. We have a further question from Mr Greg Deacon of Camberwell relating to the Camberwell Fresh Food Market. Again, this question has been disallowed. The question does not relate to a matter on the agenda for the current council meeting, and the question has not been raised previously in writing and received a written response from a councillor or a member of council staff. As such, the question is disallowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. Councillors have also received a copy of this question. Mr Deacon will receive a written response to this question in due course from the Director of Community Support. We have a further question from one question from Mr Ian Hundley of Boroondara North. This question has been allowed. This is in relation to the Assembly of Councillors. As regular reporting of assemblies of councillors is no longer required under the Local Government Act, what, if any, provisions now require the public reporting of meetings of councillors with officers and other parties? The question does relate to a matter of the agenda for the current council meeting and therefore is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. I call upon the Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr David Thompson, to respond to this question from Mr Hundley. Thank you, Mr Thompson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Mr Hundley, thank you very much for the question. The answer to your question is specifically addressed in Chapter 6 of the Governance Rules. A copy of the Governance Rules are available from the Council website. Chapter 6 of the Governance Rules sets out the provisions now required for the public reporting of meetings of councillors with officers and other parties. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thompson. And Mr Hundley, you'll receive a written response to your question in due course. We have a further question from Mr Hundley of Boroondara North relating to the Bulleen Park and Ride Urban Design and Landscape Plan submission. To allow this question, I've revised it to read as follows. Will Council advocate for more bus services to enhance local residential amenity? The question relates to a matter on the agenda for the current council meeting and therefore is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules. I call upon the Director of Places and Spaces, Mr Daniel Freer, to respond to this question from Mr Hundley. Thank you, Mr Freer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Hundley, for the question. Council's advocacy in relation to public transport services will be guided by Council's integrated transport strategy and any future public transport policies, plans and strategies. With reference to public bus services in Boroondara, the integrated transport strategy actions include the following: improving connections, investigating current bus service provision issues, advocating for improved service frequencies, reducing route circuitousness, improving bus priority, improving bus stop facilities, investigative integration with cycling and bus travel, and investigating incentives to encourage bus operators to choose more efficient alternative fuels where appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Freer. And Mr Hundley, you'll also receive a written response to your question in due course. Move on to item 6 of the agenda, notices of motion. Mr Thompson, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there are no notices of motion for consideration this evening.
Thank you, Mr Thompson. Item 7, presentations of officers' report. This first item, item 7.1, contract number 2020/95, Council Chambers Audio-Visual Modernisation and Management Services. This will be introduced by Mr David Thompson, Manager of Governance and Legal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this report is seeking Council to award a contract to Insight Systems Group Proprietary Limited for audio-visual modernisation for the Council Chamber and adjacent meeting rooms and for associated managed services. Audio-visual modernisation of the Council Chamber and adjacent meeting rooms will assist with greater transparency in Council decision-making and community participation in meetings of the Council. The current audio-visual system in use in the Council Chamber was introduced in 1995 and is now at its end of life. The current system inhibits the effective running of Council meetings and the opportunity for community members to effectively participate in our meetings. There are ongoing audio issues arising and limited options to display information. This can impact on the ability for the community attending meetings to follow meeting proceedings and to make presentations to Council. The new audio-visual technology will address the issues currently arising. It will help increase transparency in decision-making through the ability to provide a quality live stream of the meetings of Council. We will no longer need to hire equipment in, as we've done so tonight, and will enable the community to present more effectively to Council. This project will replace and/or upgrade most of the audio-visual technology used within the Council Chamber and the adjoining rooms that support meetings of Council when additional seating is required. The proposed new audio-visual equipment will prevent ongoing equipment failures, for example, the feedback that we've received previously through the microphones. Improve sound quality for attendees within the Council Chamber and the adjacent wattle and acacia rooms. Provide large screen monitors and improve sound in the wattle and acacia rooms to enable councillors to better engage with overflow audiences in these rooms. Enable capability to broadcast, i.e. live stream Council meetings via the internet. Improve content presented via connected devices and the document cameras, which will enhance the experiences for members of the community. The ability to display on the screen who is speaking within the chamber. Improve control of technology capabilities within the Council Chamber for councillors and Council staff. It will also allow remote participants to engage in meetings of Council if required. It will also provide large screen monitors and sound in the civic foyer to better engage with overflow audiences and to avoid the need of hiring in equipment. I therefore commend the officer's recommendation as set out on the screen behind me to you this evening.
Thank you, Mr Thompson. Councillors, before I move to asking if there are any questions, if we move towards asking any questions in the confidential section of the report, I'll seek to adjourn the meeting. Councillors, are there any questions of Mr Thompson? Councillor Watson.
Not a question, but I'd be just delighted if I could move the motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Duly noted. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and apologies, I'm sure it's in the document, but I just haven't found it. If this is supported tonight by Council, what's the ETA of when the equipment would be installed and running?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Hollingsworth, the expectation is for the first council meeting in 2021, the chamber will be fully operational.
Councillors, any further questions of officers on this item? Councillor Biggar.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I just ask about the whether that would tie us into a commitment to always purchase follow-up equipment with this company? Does that make sense, that question?
I'll pass that to...
Yeah, through you, Mayor. No, there's no such commitment.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions of officers? There appears to be none.
Through you, Mayor, sorry, could I just clarify the answer to the question before in relation to the equipment? It will be fully operational to allow meetings by the start of February. The LED wall which is proposed is scheduled slightly later because of the lead time in that particular item of equipment coming, so that will be slightly after, but the meetings will nonetheless be able to take place from the 1st of February with the new equipment.
Thank you, Mr Dobson, for that clarification. Councillor Watson, you foreshadowed to move a motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Having seen our community and ourselves struggle with this, I'm delighted to move the motion as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And do I have a seconder for Councillor Watson's motion, which is the motion on the screen? Councillor Park?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this item? There appears to be no opposition. Councillors, just before I move to the mover of this, obviously the standing convention is on an item like this that if there's no opposition, I'll put it to the vote, but we're all on our training wheels in our new council, so if there are any comments that people would like to make in relation to this debate, please put your light on. Otherwise, I will move to the mover just to close this out.
I wonder if you just mind confirming, we had this discussion prior here too, but that this is not dissimilar from equipment being installed in a number of other councils around metropolitan Melbourne.
I'll allow that question. Councillor Gold, we're just in debate at the moment, but I'll allow that a question.
Through you, Mayor, we had an independent organisation help us with the design of this system to ensure it was appropriate for the purpose. They've confirmed that there are a number of other councils in Melbourne that have installed similar equipment in the last few years and others who are installing and out to market for, again, very similar equipment to what's proposed here.
Thank you. I'll return back to the debate and there appears to be, I'll pass to you as the mover.
Thank you. If I could just ask when people are speaking to take their masks off, it would be really helpful. Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief. I think I've already foreshadowed my feelings about this particular installation. Having seen the community and ourselves absolutely struggle with being able to do what are really quite basic things, this will put us in the 21st century and really enable us to be able to hear our community the way they want to be heard, and they can hear us when we get in the overflow room to hear people saying, "We can't hear." That's completely unacceptable. So I really look forward to the installation of this equipment and commend this motion to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now move to put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you again, councillors. We'll move on to item 7.2, Balloon Park and Ride, Urban Design and Landscape Plan Submission. Just wait for our presenter this evening, Ms Claire Davey, Coordinator of Transport and Management, to take her seat and present our report this evening.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Apologies, it's been a while. Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for your time tonight. So this report seeks council endorsement of a draft submission to the Minister for Planning about the proposed Bulleen Park and Ride Urban Design and Landscape Plan, or the UDLP, associated with the North East Link, the NEL. The UDLP is a requirement of the North East Link Incorporated document, which forms part of the Boroondara planning scheme. The North East Link project, or NELP, there's a lot of acronyms, released the UDLP on 2nd of November 2020. They invited the community and councils to participate in a consultation and engagement exercise about the plan over a 5-week period ending Monday, 7 December 2020. Council received notice on the 2nd of November about the UDLP development and the consultation period. To ensure we could prepare a draft submission and a report for consideration tonight, that is prior to the submission deadline of 5 p.m, 7 December 2020, council officers engaged Hanson Partnership to assist in the review of the UDLP and the preparation of the draft submission. The team worked over the weekend before last to help complete both documents. It is clear from the UDLP documentation that the design of the proposed facility is very well developed, with the depth of design detail, artist impression and 3D renders indicating a dedicated team within NELP have been working on the project for some considerable time. The proposed park and ride is located in Manningham, just north of the border, on public open space known as the Coonung Creek Reserve, not to be confused with our Coonung Creek Reserve. According to NELP, the site has been selected to avoid the need to construct a temporary park and ride on the Coonung Creek Reserve in Boroondara, near Doncaster Road, while the existing park and ride at Doncaster undergoes expansion and upgrade. It is understood the bus network in the region cannot operate or function effectively without a park and ride in operation. The original Bulleen Park and Ride location identified in the Environment Effects Statement, being the Boroondara Tennis Centre, will not be available for use as a park and ride until the end of construction in 6 or 7 years' time. The alternative location proposed by NELP is available immediately and ensures a park and ride is operational in the region at all times and without having to build a temporary facility in Boroondara. This UDLP is the first time council has seen a plan that does not result in the use of the Boroondara Tennis Centre as a park and ride facility. Through the Environment Effects Statement exhibition process and the Inquiry and Advisory Committee panel hearing in 2019, we expressed our concerns about losing the tennis centre to enable a park and ride to be built on the site. The UDLP does not provide detail about the future of the tennis centre site, and officers have sought clarification from NELP about this matter. As the tennis centre site is within Boroondara, council will seek to continue to be involved in the design process for the site. The park and ride itself proposes to provide 80 bicycle parking spaces, 10 motorcycle parking spaces, 367 car parking spaces and 5 kiss and ride spaces over 3 levels. Provision is made for staff car parking and maintenance vehicle access as well. Additionally, an allowance has been made in the design for the provision of charging points for e-bikes and also up to 24 electric vehicles when demand warrants. Buses will use 2 platforms, the southern and the northern. The southern platform caters for city-bound or inbound buses, and the northern platform for Doncaster-bound or outbound buses. Passenger amenities such as an indoor heated and cooled waiting area, a drinking fountain, staff ticket office and vending machines are located on the northern Doncaster-bound platform only. Both platforms provide 1 Mikey machine each, as well as some seating and some bins. No lifts are provided, and travel within the facility is reliant on a 20-metre plus long underpass between the platforms, multiple sets of stairs and 2 ramps of approximately 60 metres in length each. Pedestrian and cyclist access to the facility from the south of the Eastern Freeway is limited. Boroondara residents will need to walk or cycle across the Eastern Freeway at Bulleen Road and then along Thompson's Road to catch a bus. The draft submission, attachment 1, considers the UDLP and themes issues identified under 4 headings, being functionality, accessibility, design and landscape. It offers suggestions or requests as to ways to remove or reduce the issue in an effort to provide an improved passenger experience on approach to, through and at the facility, including locating pedestrian amenities likely to be needed at the start of the journey on the southern platform, the inbound city-bound platform, and providing Melbourne appropriate shelter, shade and weather protection. Installing a passenger lift on each platform, which services each level of the facility, and an air bridge to facilitate equitable and safe access to the platforms from each level of car parking and the green roof for all users. Concealing more of the car park structure with landscape batters and earth mounds, or creating a stepped plaza area with public art installation and increased flexibility of movement between Thompson's Road and the elevated park area or green roof. And retaining as much of the existing healthy vegetation on site as possible, including the dozen or so trees on the southern edge of Campman Street in Manningham. The consultation and engagement exercise is managed through Engage Victoria, and submissions addressed to the Minister for Planning are required, as I've said, by 5 p.m. Monday, 7 December 2020. Pending the outcome of this council meeting, officers will arrange to provide our submission through the Engage Victoria website by the due date. If councillors have any questions, we would be pleased to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Davey, for your report. Councillors, are there any questions of Ms Davey? Councillor Franco.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive report. I'm delighted to see in the report that electric charging points are proposed for e-bikes, but I do question whether 24 spaces for cars is adequate. I'm also concerned about the timing proposed for the provision of that infrastructure. It's proposed that the infrastructure be delivered once demand exists, but this is one of these chicken and egg situations where if we don't provide the infrastructure and in a timely fashion, we won't have that service. So I'd like to hear your views on that, and I'd foreshadow that I'd like to move an amendment to include reference to the provision of such infrastructure in our submission.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question and the comments as well, and through you, Mayor. The electric vehicle market certainly is moving rapidly, I guess, in Melbourne, and this certainly is an opportunity to include some electric vehicle charging points for those first movers, which are, uptaking the Teslas and things like that, and for some of the second movers in that space as well. So I certainly welcome the inclusion of some extra comments about electric vehicle charging points in the submission.
If I could just do a follow-up to assist Councillor Franco, if the mood of the chamber is that that's incorporated, can officers include that, or do we need an alternative motion?
Through you, Mayor, and perhaps with assistance from... Yep, certainly we can include it in the submission, no worries.
Thank you. Any further questions of officers? Councillor Addis.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I have two questions. In submitting this doesn't in any way imply that we are actually in favour of this whole project, does it?
Thank you, Councillor Addis, and through you, Mayor. No, I don't believe it does. What it does is provide our comments on the Boroondara Park and Ride, which is a facility our community will be using, should it be built in this location. And it, in my mind, does nothing more than provide our comments and suggested improvements to that.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, should the freeway go ahead in a different way? Because what I'm seeing here is that things are changing as we go along. Is this facility still potentially useful to our residents as a sort of a standalone thing?
Again, thank you, and through you, Mayor. Our advocacy in terms of public transport access for the northern part of our community has always been quite strong, and I do believe that should the Eastern Freeway not be widened as it is planned to be under the reference design for the North East Link, and this park and ride facility is constructed, it still would be very useful to our community. It would essentially double the car parking capacity of the park and ride facilities in the area, so it would include a second one to complement the Doncaster Park and Ride, and it would essentially increase the catchment area for the bus services into the city. So I do believe it would still benefit our community, even if the freeway is not expanded as it is currently planned to.
Thanks very much. That's very helpful, Ms Davey.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question's a little tangential but it has to do with our residents being able to access bus services. Noting that the Doncaster Park and Ride is going to be upgraded, and I'm sure that Councillor Park would agree that we've dodged a significant bullet by not having to have that layover space in the location that they originally proposed. But do we have a greater understanding of what they're going to do at Doncaster and what the timing of that is? Because there's a significant difference in location between the Doncaster Park and Ride and the Bulleen, and I don't think that they're necessarily interchangeable.
Thank you, Councillor Watson, and through you, Mayor. We don't have a handle on their plans for the Doncaster Park and Ride at the moment. If they have any, they're not sharing them with us. We don't know the construction timelines or any detail like that. As soon as we do, we'll discuss with councillors.
Yeah, thank you. Mr Mayor, one follow-up, if that's all right. My question or request is similar to Councillor Franco. Could we note that this is information that's important to us and ask that it is forthcoming?
Thank you, Councillor Watson, again through you, Mayor. Certainly we can and will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions of officers? Councillor Park.
It doesn't appear to be, and if that's the case, I'm happy to move the motion.
Yep, and I believe Councillor Franco foreshadowed either moving an amendment or noting that the officers can take on board those comments that you mentioned.
If the report's to be amended to the satisfaction of the Mayor to incorporate those comments in relation to electric charging points, I'm satisfied. Alternatively, I'm happy to move a motion, whatever you consider more appropriate.
Thank you. I might defer, thank you, Councillor Franco. I might defer to you, Councillor Park, as the ward councillor then.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, and I think it's understood and accepted that the issues that Councillors Franco and Watson raised will be taken on board by the officers. So I don't think there's a need to incorporate specific reference in the motion, but I did want to add to the list by the addition of F2F to include the state members of Parliament who represent the city of Boroondara. I just think it's probably appropriate to keep them in the loop.
Thank you, Councillor Park. What we'll do is we'll just wait for officers to bring that up on the screen. Councillor Park, this doesn't specifically name those members of Parliament, but does that satisfy your...
It does, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for Councillor Park? I think, Councillor Bickey, you were just in before Councillor Watson.
Just pipped her. I'll second that, thank you.
Thank you very much. To assist Councillor Park, is there any opposition on this item this evening? There appears to be no opposition. However, I will defer to you, Councillor Park, if you've got any closing comments on this one.
Look, I'll be very brief. I think the report was very comprehensive and compelling, and the motion makes good sense, so I'd urge councillors to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Park. I will now put this motion that you can see on the screen to the vote. All those in favour? I declare... I think I saw everyone's hands. Just show again. Thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you again, councillors. We'll move on to item 7.3, councillor assignments for 2020-2021. This will be introduced by Ms Celia Robinson, Coordinator of Governance.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, to coincide with the mayoral year, Council has traditionally appointed councillors on an annual basis to a range of internal and external advisory committees, external management committees and boards and partnership groups. Nominations are invited for the various councillor assignments for 2020-2021. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Park?
Not a question, Chair, just foreshadowing a motion.
Thank you. No further questions. Councillor Park, I'll move to you as a mover of the motion.
Thank you, Chair. The motion that I propose to move is just being put up on the screen. And I think that incorporates the emailed request by Councillor Bigger earlier in the day. It does. So that's my motion, Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. And our governance team, we're just going through the last list of councillor assignments. Maybe, did everyone see the first page? If we can just start with the first page again, sorry, governance team. Item 1, Performance Review Delegate Committee. Item 2, Management Performance Review Committee. Noted. Okay. We'll just pause on this. Does that look all correct to councillors? So if we can move to item 7. 7 to 9. Does that look correct, councillors? Item 10. Correct, thank you. If we can move to the next page. Item 11 through to 15. That appears to be correct. External advisory committees. Item 1 through to 8. That appears to be no concerns from councillors, and I think that concludes those items. Oh no, sorry. Item 9 and 10 on external committees. External management committees and boards, items 1, 2 and 3. Representative of group partnership groups. I think that looks to be correct. Councillor Park, you've moved that as the motion. I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Sinfield's had a red light on.
For the second.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to that? There appears to be none. I will put that motion to the vote unless you seek to speak to it, Councillor Park.
I think it is worthy of a few brief words, and I was going to suggest that, Mr Mayor, you might consider allowing comment if councillors do wish to, even in the absence of opposition. But just to briefly summarise, Council has had a number of internal advisory committees, external advisory committees, and has also traditionally made appointments to external management committees and some partnership groups. In many ways, this is simply a a procedural motion appointing councillors to those various committees. But I think what is worthy of note, and of course those appointments come following discussion and expressions of interest amongst all councillors as to how they'd like to serve on the various committees. But I think what's noteworthy is the fact that there are a couple of new internal advisory committees. There's the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee and there's the Cycling Advisory Committee. And I won't speak about them in particular, but I think that there might be some of our colleagues who might wish the opportunity. So I just put that forward for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Park, and you're absolutely correct. With acknowledgement that there are new committees for this new council, open it up to any councillors who would like to speak to this motion. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the process in relation to the Cycling Advisory Committee and the Climate Advisory Committee. They're both committees that I very keenly support and advocate, but in appointing councillors to them, we don't have terms of reference created as such. So could we get some advice in relation to the process of appointing councillors prior to the creation of terms
For the purpose of clarity, councillors, I'll allow Councillor Franco's question through to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to confirm that the terms of reference will be developed for consideration by each of the groups. So the councillor membership will look at those terms and give advice as to how they would like to see them structured. It is important to note that most of these groups are internal advisory groups, so they will have no external membership on them. That doesn't preclude those groups from seeking external input and hearing from others who are not on the group, but the membership is primarily, in fact, solely internally focused, unless it's an external appointment in itself. So the terms of reference will come to each group for consideration and ultimate approval.
Any other councillors seeking to speak to this item, noting we are in debate moving a motion? Councillor Gold.
I'd just like to extend it to point out that one of the other committees has expanded, which is really the Glenferrie Placemaking Group, which has been combined with the Glenferrie Oval and the Tuck Stand, and we'll also look at Grace Park and relationships with Swinburne. I think this is very important because it'll probably combine a lot of the thinking on all of those areas, and I think it was I'm very pleased to see that committee set up.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Any other councillors? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd also like to make note that the Heritage Advisory Committee is also a new committee this council term, and delighted to have the opportunity to further work on consideration to our heritage in Boroondara, which clearly is very important to our residents and to council, and it's a good opportunity to explore our heritage action plan even further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Are there any further speakers on this item? I'd also like to just reiterate that with our fresh new council for our 4-year term, these new councillor assignments reflect the will of our new council as well as the community in general. So I'll move to you as the mover, Councillor Park.
No reply, Chair, but thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you again, councillors. Move on to item 8, general business. Are there any items of general business this evening? There appears to be none. Item 9, urgent business. Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? There appears to be none. Confidential business. I believe there are no items of confidential business. Well, thank you again. This brings us to the end of our council business for this evening, the very first council meeting of this new council term. Before I close the meeting, I'd like to thank all of you who've joined online this evening and wish you and your family good health. I declare the council meeting closed at 7:20. Thank you.